This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
How would you like to get more customers, make more profits, and have bigger breakthroughs? Get Doberman Dan's profit-boosting breakthroughs. Normally, this would cost you $98 per month, but right now, for listening to this show, he's giving you a free copy of his Doberman Dan letter. All you have to do is go to DobermanDan.com and sign up to get your free copy now.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
I think you guys agree with me that this would actually be more fun if we were truly having this in a bar and had a couple drinks under our belt, just like we were talking about, right?
Why don't we, Dan? We're all in Florida. I'm getting kind of pissed that you keep talking about this and it never happens.
Well, it seems like a good idea in theory, but the thing that keeps getting in the way is that I am truly lately have turned into a hermit. Like, you have to pry me out of my house with a crowbar. But I do it for you guys to get together with you and Jack. By the way, Jack, welcome. Jack Bourne, everybody.
Yeah, great to be here. I was just going to say, just because we're having this conversation virtually, we could actually do the drinking part. We could all just go grab a beer.
Good idea.
That's what I like about this guy. He solves problems.
Let me see what I got here in this top drawer. See if I got anything to
in your desk drawer.
Drink,
really,
shoot, or smoke.
It's old school.
Madman over here. He's like, oh yeah, I got this bottle of whiskey laying here.
We could make this more interesting. We're all in Florida, and you do know that medical marijuana was just approved on the ballot last month, right?
That's right. I got some doctor friends. I think I suddenly have glaucoma.
Funny. I'm developing the same.
It's debilitating.
So, Jack, I should know this as many times as we've spoken. I should know your story, but I don't know it as well as you do. So I always like to find out, like, how does someone find themselves into this crazy little world of marketing, more specifically online marketing? So please do tell.
Okay, so I will give the abbreviated version so that no one falls asleep. But it started with me realizing during an argument with my last boss ever that I was not fit for taking orders from someone else. And we had this. We came to this epiphany at the same time during our shouting match in my office, and I said, I don't think I can work here anymore. And he said, I came to the same conclusion. So he left, and I called up my wife and said, I just quit my job. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. So typical entrepreneur style, we like to jump out of the 25th story window and build the plane before we hit the pavement, hopefully. So at the time, we didn't have any kids. We now have two beautiful girls. And so that gave me a lot more flexibility to just make that leap. But it really was because I hated my last job so bad, and my last boss was such an ass that it actually was a great stroke of luck, because I think sometimes we need that push out of our comfort zone to make that leap. So yeah, I jumped, and at the time I had been consuming a lot of Dan Kennedy, Glazer Kennedy newsletters. I don't know if it was Glazer Kennedy yet, but it was definitely Dan Kennedy, and I think Glazer had the back page at the time of the newsletter. And so I was reading that as often as I could. I was also subscribed to Perry Marshall's newsletter, and it seemed like there was a small elite crowd of cool kids who had figured out this online marketing thing. And so I dove headfirst into this. And basically, the last job that I was at the short version is that it was a healthcare staffing company. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm going to build sort of the eBay version, like the online healthcare staffing version of this, where I'm going to connect healthcare staffing companies with these people who are trying to get the jobs, and I'll be that meeting point. And so I spent a year writing the code and building this up because I did have some programming background. And so after a year of doing that and taking odd jobs to bring in some money to help subsidize what my wife was bringing in, my wife came to me and said, honey, it seems like you've been having a great time these past 11 months, but it's really time to find out if this has been an interesting hobby or if you can actually like make money with it. So this was long before Jeff Walker was famous for product launch formula. There really wasn't a manual for doing a product launch, but what I ended up doing was a quick and dirty version of a product launch. I just said, okay, I'm going to come up with a charter membership. Here's the price. And I started sending out emails and saying, we're going to start charging for this. You guys have been using it. So now it's going to be a paid service. And here's the cutoff time to jump in. And so we got one person to sign up and the rest was crickets. And I thought, oh, expletive. I've just wasted 11 months of my life. The one smart thing that I did was, there's two smart things I did. One was that I priced it in such a way where I figured, okay, if I got 10 people to sign up, that would be enough for me to not go back to work. I didn't want to price it where, okay, I'm making some money, but I still have to go back to work because it's not enough. It was either all or nothing. So I priced it that way. Rather than pricing it based on what I thought people would pay, I just did the math. I said, okay, I think 10 people will sign up. If this goes well and I need X amount of dollars, so this is what I'm going to charge, which was a lot more than I would have charged if I just said, well, what do I think people will pay? So that was a very smart thing that I did. And then the other thing was that I actually held people to that deadline. So when we heard nothing but crickets, we got on the phone, we were calling people, trying to get people to sign up, and it seemed like this thing was dead. We only had one person signing up. So I said, okay, well, the deadline's here, so I'm going to cut off people's access. And so I cut off people's access, and lo and behold, my phone started ringing, emails started coming in. Why can't I access the site? Well, you idiot, I told you with 5 emails that I was turning this thing off. And they said, okay, I'll go get the corporate card. What I then learned was that all these people who were using it were the underlings, the salespeople, and they had to go get the corporate card. And so it wasn't until that deadline was forced on them that they actually went and asked their boss for the card. And in the next week, $20,000 came in. And so that was my first introduction to the power of a legitimate, authentic deadline. And so without knowing what I was doing, I did sort of a poor man's version of a product launch. And that website ended up sustaining basically our monthly bills and expenses for the next 5 years and really gave me the breathing room to really hone my craft and to dive further into marketing and persuasion and also learn more about programming. And then that led to working with Perry Marshall as his marketing manager for several years. And now I've got several software companies, software products. You know that I had AW Pro Tools, which added marketing automation to Aweber. Earlier this year, I sold that off to an investor. I started that in 2012, sold it off. That was a success. And these days, I've got several software products. One of them, the one that I'm hyper focused on over the past year is deadlinefunnel.com, which back to my story, that's when I realized, oh, wow, these deadline things work. So Deadline Funnel is a way to impose authentic, genuine deadlines for people who are going through some sort of online funnel. And so I've got a few other ones as well, including surveyfunnel.io. But I'm really big into helping to solve other entrepreneurs' problems through software. That's just what I have gravitated to over the years, and I really, really enjoy it. The thing that really gets me fired up is not just improving my own skills as someone who's I've had to learn how to be a leader and builder of teams, but what really gets me fired up is when I get clients who tell me, man, you've really changed my life. What you're doing has made my life better. That truly gets me fired up and motivated and ready to charge the next hill. So I said that was going to be the short version. That didn't seem like the short version, but there you go. That's the story.
Yeah, man, that's good to know. I want to talk more about your software business, but isn't it interesting that so many of us found our way into this world because of something Dan Kennedy published? How did you stumble upon him?
Oh, okay. This, I promise, will be the short version. So if you go back even further, I graduated from college I was planning on being a doctor, but I realized I didn't want to. I realized that early enough. So I ended up graduating with a Spanish major, and my dad said at graduation, well, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea. So I found my way into financial services. So I was working for actually Prudential. I think this is the first time I've ever told this story. So I was working for Prudential, and not the creme de la creme of the financial services industry, at least for that position. But anyways, that's who I was working for. And this was, the sales, and this is the early 90s, the sales and marketing process that they had for someone like me just coming into the business was just manipulative and brutal. Basically, it was, okay, sit down and write out 100 people that you know, or your friends, like your friends and family, just fill the thing out and then start pestering them to sell them.
Oh my God. The old Amway thing. Yeah.
It was just like, you've signed up, like, welcome to the inner circle of hell. You're just, I think waterboarding might be more enjoyable. Anyways, so after going through several weeks of this type of misery, I was reading one of the trade magazines, and gosh, I hope I don't blank on the guy's name, but so it was a Dan Kennedy prodigy, and I really want to remember this guy's name because this is what got me into the world of direct response. There was an ad, a full page ad. It was Jeff Paul. So there was a full page ad talking about, tell the home office to go, fly a kite because they're making you prospect in miserable ways. Wouldn't it be great if you only dealt with people who wanted to talk with you, who were pre-qualified and ready to do business with you? And to me, that was the equivalent of saying, how would you like to be able to suddenly be able to leap over your house? To me, that was just so mind-blowing that I could talk with only people who were interested prospects. And so I bought the guy's course, and he talked a lot about where he learned this stuff from, which was Dan Kennedy. And I ended up on Dan's list. I bought some of his stuff, and then I'm getting his books and his newsletters. And that's how I found my way into Dan's world, and then from Dan's world into Perry's world. So that's how that happened.
Dan has converted so many of us over to the dark side that way. I'm fascinated by your business model. I was, whatever you want to call it, charter subscriber of AW Pro Tools back when it very first came out. Still I'm a user. Brilliant product, by the way. And same thing with deadline funnels. So I'm personally fascinated by those and want to get your take on why you got into software. But the thing that turns me on is that there's a pain of disconnect. Like for me to cancel AW Pro Tools or Deadline Funnel is darn near going to take an act of God at this point because I'm using them. I've been using them. They're part of my thing. And so, if I stop paying for those for some reason, I'm going to really feel the pain. And then I'd have to probably try to find another solution. And all the other solutions suck. So I like that from a business model perspective, because when you get people happily involved in a product like that, I imagine your retention once they start using it is a really long time. Is that why you got into software?
That's all of that is true, but that's not why I got into software. I naturally gravitated to software. I was programmed. My parents bought me an Apple IIe. I know that dates me. It's like saying I used to ride a dinosaur to school, but I did some very literally basic programming language on the Apple IIe. Kind of put it down for some time and then picked it back up in ninth grade, and again put it down. Around ninth grade I found I got a girlfriend, and so everything except hanging out with a girlfriend went out the window. But yeah, so I very early on I caught the programming bug, and so when I was trying to make my way in this internet space, it seemed like a natural thing to do is to create software that would solve people's problems. And I had some initial success, which was partially luck, partially hard work with the healthcare staffing website. And I really enjoyed the recurring revenue. For several years, my job was basically to run credit cards, and that was pretty much it. And so I really enjoyed that. That seemed like a great profession to have, is just to charge people's card. And so I really fell in love with that. I didn't connect the idea of having software as a service concept. That these pieces didn't connect as early as I wish that they had. But I remember when I was first coming out with AW Pro Tools, I had originally thought of it as a WordPress plugin, and I kind of realized, this is there's going to be some challenges with, like, if I ask you to install it on your WordPress, it might conflict with other stuff that you have installed, and you might have crappy hosting. And so I built it as this software as a service platform. And I was also fortunate that at that time, things like Stripe for collecting credit cards and some other tools have made it a lot easier than it was even a few years before to start a recurring revenue type of business. So that's kind of why I got into it. Is just it really played well to my skills and strengths. But everything that you said about pain of disconnect is true for the people that you get to use it. So I don't have any direct experience with selling drugs, but I call it legalized drug selling, because the whole thing is that if you can get someone to be a user, then they're going to be using for a long time. The big difference is that this type of drug is good for them, but it is highly addictive. I mean, if you build it into your business, unless you go out of business, it's really, really painful to remove AW Pro Tools or Deadline Funnel, or just imagine if you're using Infusionsoft and you decide the next greatest thing is now, let's say, ConvertKit or ActiveCampaign or Drip or one of these other email systems. It's going to have to be 10 times, 100 times better than what you're already using, because if you've been doing business for a long time, you've got all these emails written and all the links, and you've got everything all set up. And so to make that transition is extremely painful. So yeah, software as a service can be extremely profitable. The real challenge with the business model is getting someone to implement it. There's really at least two sales. There's probably actually more than that, but the two main sales is getting someone to bring out their credit card, which we all know is the challenge, is to get some stranger on the internet to say, okay, I'm actually going to go grab my wallet, pull out the credit card, enter the information, and give you my money. But that's just sale numero uno. The second sale is actually getting them to use it, because they're either going to be the type of person that stays around forever, or they're going to be the type of person that says, you know what, I'm quitting my trial early, or hey, I meant to cancel and it's 5 days past my first bill, so please refund my money and cancel my account. And so getting them to actually use the product is extremely important, which, if you think about it, in some, this isn't as true anymore, but if you go back a few years, people who were selling information products, they may have wanted everyone to use and implement their course, but at the end of the day, it really didn't matter all that much. They had a certain return rate, but if it sat on their hard drive, it sat on their hard drive. But when someone is seeing their credit card getting hit every single month, it doesn't take long before, if they're not using it, they're going to cancel. And so it's really, really important to make sure that they're using it and getting value.
Or their wife tells them to cancel. She's looking over the credit card bill. Like, what is this?
That's what I think is funny about Jack. He says, I couldn't have a boss, but he's got a wife. He knows he has a boss.
Don't we all?
That's right.
So you said sale numero uno. So that Spanish, you're majoring in Spanish, actually did serve you. You used it on this interview. So
I did.
So you can tell your dad that.
He would be so proud.
Dad, guess what? I did get to use that Spanish degree. So I'm curious, man, with AW Pro Tools being so way cool, so cutting edge, why'd you sell it, man? Were you just bored?
Two reasons. So one reason is that I had some contacts inside of Aweber, and they had some changeover, and I had heard through some of my contacts little rumblings that they were starting to think about or starting to put things into place to basically replace some of the features that AW Pro Tools had. Now, I knew that they were playing catch up and they weren't going to be able to replace all of them, but that really made me think, okay, I probably should focus on one thing, and maybe it's time for me to exit. Maybe it's time for me to find a buyer. But the other reason is that I really wanted to see what it was like to get hyper focused on one thing rather than spreading my attention too thin. And so I got really, really hyper focused on Deadline Funnel, and consequently it was growing. It's been growing like a weed. It's been growing really, really fast. So yeah, those are the two main reasons. Now, just so that if anyone's wondering, well, okay, did you sell it to someone who just didn't know, and so they bought something at the high point, and you fooled them? The person who bought AW Pro Tools Tools is a very savvy investor, and they were well aware of everything that AWeber was undertaking. And so they went in with open eyes. They were bringing deeper pockets to the table, and they had plans for how it was going to fit into their portfolio. So the person who bought AW Pro Tools was well aware of the initiatives that AWeber was. By the time I sold it, what AWeber was doing was well underway, and so it wasn't any sort of secret thing. And we had lost some of our subscribers, so the number of people who were using AW Pro Tools had dipped down, and it was coming back up, but it had dipped down when they initially came out with some of their new automation features. But as I told the person who bought AW Pro Tools, there's always, even with AWeber coming out with some of their new automation, AW Pro Tools at that time and still to this day has a lot of really cool, powerful features for power users. And so that's always going to be the market that AW Pro Tools serves, is that AWeber power user who either doesn't want to switch to a different email service provider, or the pain of switching is just too much. And so they just want enough marketing automation.
Where'd you find that buyer, Jack? How'd you dig him up?
Yeah, so I listed on Flippa, but not in the main marketplace. So it wasn't, you couldn't go and publicly find it. You had to, so they have a separate sort of red carpet section. If your site generates enough revenue, and it's up to them to decide if you meet that criteria or not. But if your site generates enough revenue, they have a division called Deal Flow. And so it's basically their boutique version of Flippa. And so rather than it being publicly available, hey, everyone, I'm selling AW Pro Tools, and also you get a whole bunch of people lowballing and just throwing in just like garbage bids. This was a deal where they were going to accredited investors that had shown in one way or another, I guess through screenshots of some of their bank accounts, that they had enough money to make these types of investments. So that's where I found the buyer.
All right, you've been listening to Doberman Dan's Off the Chain show, his interview with Jack Bourne, and we're going to pick this up next week when he starts talking about how to build a software company. We talk about marketing, and we even get into some dirty little secrets of the software business. But before we wrap up, Jack has a special offer he wants to share with you.
So I've set up a special promo code for everyone who's listening to this podcast. And so what you do is you go to deadlinefunnel.com/special and enter in the promo code DAN, DAN, and you'll get a special offer that I do not make publicly available. So again, you go to deadlinefunnel.com/special, enter in the promo code DAN, and you'll see a special offer for Deadline Funnel so you can test drive it and see how it increases your conversions.
Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to create rivers of revenue from your existing customers, then the next thing you need to do is go to DobermanDan.com. He's giving away a free copy of his $98 per month Doberman Dan letter just for listening to the show. Go to DobermanDan.com now and sign up for your free issue.
This is the podcastfactory.com.